Hello there guys, it's Joey. Welcome back to I Can't Witch Without, the series in which each week we take a look at an element from my particular practice of witchcraft that I feel affects the way I practice. And each week it could be a crystal, a herb, a flower, and so on and so forth. And we tend to look at resources, giving a definition, and then use that as a jumping off point to say how I feel about the particular item in question. And disclaimer at the start of all of these videos is the I Can't Witch Without series is not to say that you require any or all of these items in order to be a witch. It's just taking a look at what I feel affects my practice and sharing some information and having a bit of a discussion about it. So this week we're going a little bit off script, and to celebrate my receiving of, rather than the published date, which the published date was the 2nd of May, for the Animal Spirit Oracle from the Wild Unknown, I thought this week on I Can't Witch Without, we take a recap, a relook, a reevaluate of the Wild Unknown tarot deck. So it's slightly different from the usual setup, but I thought that it kind of fed well into where I've been this week and how I feel about this particular tarot deck. Because it's been some years now, I hate to think how many, but a few years since I received and started working with the Wild Unknown, and this is the first edition. I'm not sure if you can get the first edition anymore, if it's just the second edition. The second edition has a slightly flimsier card stock, although I had a few shuffles with the other card stock and it is quite nice for shuffling, so I understand that element of it, but personally I prefer the slightly sturdier card stock. And it has the original designs. I think about 5, I believe, of the cards were altered from a colour aesthetic. The images all stayed the same, but the way they were coloured had changed, I believe. So I have the original set, and I love them so much that I didn't want the second edition. It would be, I think it would bother me personally, given how much I love these cards, to see certain cards then changed. I think it might bother me on a sort of OCD level. I think it might get to me and not confuse me, but kind of irk me, I think is what I'm going for. So this deck, the Wild Unknown Tarot deck, has been my go-to deck for years. Nothing else has come close. There are other Oracle decks I use regularly, and that's somewhat different. But this tarot deck is the one that I come back to time and time and time again. And I should say here that I only read tarot for myself personally. It's a very personal process. On the Facebook page each week I share a oracle card, and sometimes it will be a tarot card. And I sort of talk about how I view the imagery. And I actually did that recently with the Empress, which is in shot. So if you want sort of to have a written snippet of how I sort of dissect the cards or analyse the cards or give meanings to the cards, the Empress is up there on the Starry Eyed Facebook page from a couple of weeks ago. But generally speaking, I only do tarot for myself. If somebody is close to me who needs or requests an oracle reading or a tarot reading, I might do it for on a very personal basis, but that's not very often. I did read tarot for a while, some years ago now, and it was just draining, and I find it very draining to read for other people. I get quite invested in the things that I do, so it was a little bit emotionally draining for me. So now I keep it very separate and mainly just read tarot for myself. It's a very personal, intricate part of my path, and therefore there are certain parts of of this video which I'm not gonna discuss at all or in depth, because some parts of it are highly personal. But I thought we could basically gush about the Wild Unknown and have a look at elements of the Wild Unknown that have kept me coming back to it time and time again, rather than feeling disconnected to any other tarot deck. I own a couple of tarot decks, but this one is just the pièce de résistance for me. And I love every single card in this deck. With the Animal Oracle, the Animal Spirit Oracle that they've just released, there is one card in particular that I'm not too keen on. But with these, every single card has that incredible aesthetic. And there are a lot of people out there who love the Wild Unknown, and it's not surprising. The art style, the visual, the aesthetic is so strong, is so beautiful, is so well done, that it becomes almost iconic in its own ways. I would probably full on state that it is an iconic tarot deck. It's one that you see an image from, and if you're in tarot circles, even in the slightest, you will recognise it. I don't think that takes away from it either. Sometimes when decks are hugely popular for a little while, the market becomes a bit saturated with images of it, and people might get turned off with that. I don't think that's the case with the Wild Unknown. I think it is so unique and so powerful and so magical that it just keeps people coming back to it. I mean, there was a second edition reprint of it with different images, and I bet a lot of people did purchase it. So why? Why does the Wild Unknown speak to me in a way that no other tarot deck really does thus far? First and foremost, I'm a little bit of an oddling, perhaps, in that I'm not keen on humanoid figures within my cards, within my artwork, within my tarot deck. With oracle decks, I can get behind some of them. I do prefer them without, and for the most part I think my initial preferred, although I still adore it, my initial preferred oracle deck, which is the Inner Hue Connected and Free oracle deck, is very, very similar, I believe, in that there are no humanoids. I'm going to check as I talk. Interestingly enough, that I connected to the Inner Hue Connected and Free, the Alchemist Oracle, so strongly from the visual images, and a lot of people at the time were saying that there was an artistic leaning towards the Wild Unknown, that some people were calling it the little sister of the Wild Unknown, the oracle version of the Wild Unknown. I think it's a disservice to both, and I think it probably upset both artists, or irritated them, because whilst I can understand where some of that referencing comes from, because there is a use of watercolour and lines in some of the Inner Hue Oracle deck, it's still standalone enough. Yeah, there's no humanoid images in it. There are certain images which are very close, perhaps. I think Abundance is probably the most similar, but you can see that there is a divergence. They're not shadowing the Wild Unknown completely. There is a Buddha image. Well, I would argue that it's a Buddha image. Looks more like a Buddha statue of a god, rather than it being humanoid. And it's one of the reasons I was kind of disappointed with the tarot deck version from Inner Hue, that a lot of it was humanoid, and I didn't feel it. So I'm a bit of an oddling in that for some reason I really don't like humanoids in my tarot deck. The only real exception to that is the Mary L, and that tends to be more of a focus on gods and goddesses, and they can kind of get away with it on that tempo, but I don't know what it is. I guess perhaps it's because in my spiritual journey, I feel that there is perhaps a strength and almost a purity in connecting with animal form, and by purity what I mean is animals are truer to nature than humans are. Animals are more loving, they're more openly aggressive for their reasons of survival or mating and things, and it's very much in touch with their nature, and it's kind of like they are honest in a way that humans are not. And you can get into the psychosomatic reasons of that of me being quite introverted and antisocial perhaps, but at least within a strictly spiritual sense, for divinational purposes, my mind just easily connects to animal and nature imagery. And the Wild Unknown has no humanoid images. There are 0 humanoid images within the whole deck. The deck is very much about trees, nature, and animals. And these are things which I think speak to a lot of us. I think a lot of us are going to be drawn to that, along with the aesthetic, along with the art style. So it's beautiful representations of animals, concepts, and nature. And I loved that the Empress and the Emperor, 2 cards which traditionally are a little bit more difficult for me, were trees. And that immediately opened my mind up so much more to the symbolism invoked by the cards. So because of everything that has occurred in my life, I perhaps have a little bit of a male authority figure issue. So the Emperor card is a little bit of a difficult one for me, a little one that I don't like the whole rigid thing, I don't like the whole, the feel of a lot of the Emperor cards. But with it being this great majestic tree, and I would probably go with oak. I didn't actually get this card out, but which is a shame now I thought about it. I'll see if I can find it while I'm still talking. I'm pretty sure it's an oak, or at least I've assigned it the energies of oak in my personal practice. I'm going to keep that one out as well, because that's a good point. There he is. There you go. See, would you say he's oak? It's a silhouette, so I guess you can probably attribute whichever tree you want to his energies. And for me, that's this incredible energy of sturdiness and deep-rootedness and ancientness, but within a tree scope there's none of the abusive power that often comes with very rigid, structured, masculine figures, at least within my lifetime. So it works better. And another card that I've struggled with on the same theme is actually the Tower. And again, this could be oak, because oak are the only ones that can withstand being hit by a bolt of lightning. But that gives it additional meaning for me, and I adore tree energy in particular. So I have chosen a few tree images here that we'll talk about, the images that I've chosen and why, and I had to condense again to just pick out some of my favourites, or some of them that really represent a point that I think is really important within my personal journeying with the Wild Unknown. But with the emphasis being on tree energy, which is something that I very naturally connect to, it is something that I feel is perhaps the most spiritual thing on earth, just to sit and look and be in awe of trees. There's some absolutely giant trees near where I now live, and I just go and I just look up, and there's just something breathtaking about how huge they are, and looking at them, their whole ecosystem, their whole other world within themselves, and they're ancient when they get that big. They're huge. And then I have experiences of going into town, and I've said this before, but in case you haven't personally heard, there's a walkway going into into the city, and it's sort of on the outside of the city, and there's just all these oaks down both sides, and you're walking through it and you're getting high off the energies of them because you can just feel them, and they're just so alive and so powerful. So having the tree there, to energies which I find a little bit difficult, really opens me up personally to the images involved, and means that I can connect to what the card's meaning is, both traditionally and then taking a deeper look at the specific of that card, and what the wild unknown represents for itself, for the individual card, what is it's telling you, rather than the standard 101 meanings, if you like. That's another point which I think is very, very important when looking at the wild unknown. Originally, the guidebook, I don't know if the guidebook existed in its original form. Originally, you receive, two or three word guides like this, which you also get in the Animal Spirit Oracle deck. And I'm not sure if the guidebook existed originally or if that was later. I don't have it, and I don't have it for a very particular reason. I find that the Wild Unknown Tarot is one of those tarots which basically challenges you to journey by yourself. And the absence of the booklet for me means that every time I come back to this, it makes me think. And I like the mental exercise of going back and remembering what I thought about this card before, and where the imagery and the artwork took me in a previous journey with the Wild Unknown, and then going and investigating further and seeing where the card takes me this time. And it's like a personal journey each time you go back to these particular cards. There are some wonderful forum posts, and the forum I can't remember at all, but if you search for Wild Unknown X card meaning, you'll find them, and you'll see that people are discussing these particular cards in a forum space, and it's really nice in so much as that you can see the differing points of view, like you are partaking in an online conversation about these cards. And I think the online community surrounding the Wild Unknown is so vast, and these cards are so popular, that you can find so many differing points of view, so many conversations, so many thoughts and feelings concerning the particular cards, that it really can open you up to a new way of understanding and a new way of thinking. And these are the only tarot cards, I think, thus far, other than the Wooden Tarot, which I haven't delved into deeply yet, but they have the same thing with their abstract art and their lack of booklet. That means you have to go and search for the answer, and I think that's really important, because you can look at the card from your perspective, get all the meanings that you're getting, and you're not wrong. You know, you're not going against the booklet. You're not having to make the proactive choice to dismiss some book that's telling you what you should be thinking. Instead, you can go out and you can hear conversation, or at least see conversations about differing points of view, about the meanings, and I think that's really interesting. So it becomes much more involved, it becomes much more proactive, and it becomes like a spiritual process in and of itself, because you're learning not only about the cards, but about how you perceive the cards, and then perhaps you discover, and if you like, accidentally, in inverted commas, air quotes, what you're meant to see this time from somebody else's point of view, or you're making associations this time based on the colour, the number, the animal, and so on and so forth. So I love that element of it. So just going to take a quick look at some of the cards that I've chosen, and then hone in on some of the reasons why, and things that will sort of hopefully reveal a little bit about the Wild Unknown and my journey with it. So up the top here, ooh, look, there's the animal card from. So we have the Hierophant, I chose the Hierophant because I was super glad there was a raven within. I would say it's a raven. You could maybe make arguments about crow, but I think looking at the beak it looks more raven-like to me. I was super glad there was one in the deck. I think you could probably make arguments for the death card being a crow, and you can make arguments that the 3 of Wands, I think it is crows. I mean, they're just bird silhouettes, but I mean, I would make arguments for them being crows. That might be it. Let me go through and double check. Memory's not what she used to be, what she used to be, what she used to be. I'm pretty sure that's it though. Yeah. I'll show you the 3 of... oh no, it's the 3 of Cups, sorry, not the 3 of Wands. Yeah, of course, because I know what the 3 of Wands is. The 3 of Wands is the Portal card. Yeah, right, so... yeah, 3 of Cups on the sunset, beautiful, one of my favourites. I didn't actually choose it. I'm not entirely sure why I did that. But still, I'll keep it there, just in case I want to talk about it. But I was really, really pleased that the crow is therefore represented, because obviously the crow has deep, significant meaning to me personally on my Celtic path. It's a huge symbol of the Morrigan. Kind of a shame there wasn't a little bit more of a wolf element in here too, but yeah, it hasn't bothered me all the way through. And then the next 3 are all big cats. Now, I'm a huge fan of big cats. I think artistically they're gorgeous. I think when they're represented in the manner that they are here, it's really wonderful. And like I said, I really prefer the lack of humanoid imagery with regards to these cards. So we have cheetah, or leopard, sorry. Leopard for the magician, and he has the ellipsis, the infinity symbol on him, almost like a bow tie. It's almost, you can almost miss it as if it was a pattern of his fur, and I love that. You say things like that and you're suddenly aware of certain meanings. You're like, that infinity symbol is almost missable, like it's part of his fur, like it's a part of himself, like it's a part of his skin, like it's part of his fabric of his being. And then you're suddenly on this adventure of meaning, and the Wild Unknown does this to me all the time. I love that element of it. Strength is one of my absolute favourite cards in the deck. It's my favourite strength card that I have yet to see, and it's interesting because obviously a lot of strength cards embody lions. I'm not overly fussed by the whole standard one with the woman holding his jaws open. I love here that the rose is just gently held in the mouth. Again, you have the infinity symbol, which is a symbol that I dearly love, on his brow, and the sun beating down, and the balance of light and dark within this card. The balance of light and dark in the Wild Unknown is something that I absolutely adore. The backgrounds are often very, very simplistic in a way, in a fashion, that they're made out of lines, and there's an emphasis on monochrome versus a little blast of colour in certain cards to a whole infusion, deluge, if you will, of colour in certain cards. And I've picked a couple with real overwhelming elements of colour for that reason. But I love that interplay with light and dark, with monochrome. Monochrome is probably my preferred colour choice with a lot of things. So just having bursts of colour, I think, is an aesthetic that really appeals to me. It really draws emphasis and attention where the emphasis and the intention in the card needs to be. It draws the eye in such a way that it makes you think. I mean, a lot of cards these days are just colour saturated. Not keen on that. And then when people go the other route, sometimes going just monochrome or with greys and things, they become kind of washed out. They don't have the defined meaning that they need. The Wild Unknown strikes the balance between these two perfectly. It just does. So Here we have the lion. He's very, very beautiful. He's face on, and he has a gentleness to him, but he's strong and proud and of the card. And then the High Priestess. The High Priestess is one of the cards that initially eluded me a little bit, and it meant that I went and did some reading around white tigers and tigers being the only animal, perhaps, no, okay, one of the only big cats that's perfectly happy in water, which is something that you don't realise until you go and research, and then you're like, or unless you knew it already, because you've already studied it at some point, of course, and then it all starts to interlock and fall into place, and it starts to make sense to you. So it's wonderful like that. Again, with the Chariot only shows one of the horses. I talked about this in the Animal Spirit Oracle deck, that there is a horse, a black horse, in the Animal Spirit Oracle, and when you look at them side by side, it's like looking at the two horses of the Chariot, and it's like there's a little bit of a crossover into the Oracle, which is wonderful and really helped me to already start to connect to that particular card. And it really is clever in a way, because it kind of interlinks the artwork and the physical work. But it makes you think about what you're looking at in this card. Why are you only seeing one? Where is the other one? And then when you find out where the other one is, then you start to reanalyze the cards that you've already got. It's amazing. And here we have the Wheel of Fortune, which I really, really love. And again, was one of those cards that I went and sort of did a little research about. Kind of looks like a talisman, kind of has a Native American feel, could be like a dream catcher, and so on and so forth. There's many, many meanings, and I'm not going to go into the meanings in too much depth, because this video is probably going to be a bit long anyway. And then the Death card. Death cards are very important to me when looking at a tarot deck. It's perhaps my favourite card in the deck, and some people find this weird and some people completely understand. The Death card needs to be on point. I think it's a very powerful card. It's very integral when you're working with a crone goddess or a goddess with death energies, which I do, to have it properly represented. And I think some people are afraid of it a little bit in their artwork. It doesn't quite go where it needs to be. Like some people also don't quite go far enough perhaps in the Ten of Swords, with that being a calamity card. The worst case scenario card in a lot of interpretations, rock bottom, and people don't quite go where it needs to be. They're like afraid of the darkness a little bit, and this card is just beautiful. The stages of decay, it's all in black and white, it's very matter of fact, with a grace to it, and I appreciate that a great deal. So I'll go back over here and then we'll go down. The Mother of Wands is the card that I feel usually represents me in readings, the one that I associate with myself on a personal level. So initially I was a little bit apprehensive about all the snakes, because it's not something that I heard before the Wild Unknown took the time to really read the lore, read the medicine, read the alternative meanings. And once I came to really understand this energy, I loved it. I loved the snake imagery. The Daughter of Wands is a beautiful one as well, and it was a toss-up between that and this. But given this card really represents who I feel I am, and the kind of protective nature around the eggs, you can almost see these cards in your mind's eye. You can see a moving image. It's wonderful. So here is the 8 of Wands, and this is a card which strikes that perfect balance between that monochrome, that lighting effect, and then the blast, the bolt in this case of colour. It's one of those cards which again you have to kind of really meditate on or research with, and take a good look at the meanings and go read those conversations until you get a good grasp of it. And once you have, you start to appreciate it on so many levels. It's amazing. So then we have the Father of Pentacles. I think Pentacles get a raw deal in a lot of tarot decks. They're kind of a letdown in many, many tarot decks. Like people have decided it's the boring suit, it's the boring energy, it's the boring element, and kind of the cards reflect that. And it's really disappointing in a lot of tarot decks, and I tend to have a look at what the Pentacles are when looking at tarot decks, and like I said, I don't tend to buy tarot decks very often at all. But the Wild Unknown chose Deer and Stags. Perfect. Perfect. Not only are they regal and majestic and creatures of earth and nurturing, and then there is a gentler energy on the feminine side. There's so much lore, there's so much pagan history and culture surrounding the idea of the stag and the doe, or the white hart even, and antlers, and Coronanos for those of us who follow a more Celtic based path, and sort of the horned god for those who don't. These are strong pagan images that connect to our path and connect to the element of earth really, really well, and bring home the messages of the Pentacles in a beautiful manner. So then we have the Empress. I've kind of already covered what I really wanted to cover about trees, so if you're interested in hearing my thoughts some more about the Empress, there is on the Starry Eyed Facebook page a written discussion of the card. I will say that this card in particular represents to me my favourite time of day, which is dusk. So the colours around the branches and really associate with something which is special to my heart. So there is those moments with these cards that are very heartfelt. The Moon is a lovely card for its silhouette nature. The Wild Unknown has this tricksy little habit of switching between a white silhouette and a black silhouette depending on which card you're looking at. With the Moon, you could almost argue that the moonlight has taken over these two trees and they're glowing white, which I kind of love. And the Moon shows up a fair bit in a lot of the cards, as does the Sun. And it gives a primalness to a lot of these cards. The Moon is a very simplistic image, but it makes you think. It's like the reversal of the silhouette, things not being quite what you thought they were. There's a little bit of illusion going on in there, a little bit of a dream work, a little bit of a gateway going on, and you just sit there and the cards just draw you in. And finally I chose the Ace of Wands because that has that colour saturation that I was talking about. Certain cards all the way through suddenly have this incredible burst of colour, and because that doesn't happen that often within the cards, the ones that it does, it brings an incredible sense of what the card is about. So the Ace of Wands is the fire suit within this particular deck, and the burst of colours is like a little inferno burst, a little sunburst of the reds and oranges and the yellows, and the card has at the very centre a very, not quite rigid, but a very strong image of a wand with little foliage growing off it. So it's still almost alive in its way, and the whole card is brought to life by this incredible insurgence, if you like, of colour. And that is incredible, that because of the feel of the overall cards, the colour changes the mood completely. So I think it's a very personal thing with regards to tarot. Some people like to collect them, some people like to have a lot more of them. Me personally, I keep my tarot collection quite small. I do have an increasing number of oracle decks, which I'm fine with because of the different way in which I use them. Excuse me. Oracle cards tends to be one a day or one a week, depending on which oracle it is and what I'm looking at, and it tends to be like theme of the day, message of the day, things to be aware of, and it tends to be a less in-depth process. Tarot for me is much more ritualistic. It's a changing of energy, a changing of frame of mind, a changing of mental and emotional state, an elevation of spiritual energy. Tarot requires time, effort, energy, and love. It requires sitting down and really thinking about not only the imagery, but what the imagery relates to with regards to your questions, and the interplay between symbolism and colour and the image and the deck setup tarot spread that you have engaged in, the questions, the underlying questions, the things you haven't considered. And it's much more of a journey. And because of that, the wild unknown has become integral to my style of witchcraft. And I just really wanted to celebrate that this week. I thought this would make an interesting divergence from the usual I Can't Witch Without setup, but one that I believe in wholeheartedly. Right, so that's it, I think, for this video. Many blessings.